world. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will drop Ukraine's NATO bid, but rejects giving up territory to Russia, as he was expecting the West to offer some kind of security guarantee. Chile's far-right Jose Antonio Castro's firm stance against crime after winning presidency. Castro, who's 59, leads Chile's Republican Party and secured the presidency on his third attempt. Czech President Peter Pavel appointed the government of new Prime Minister Andrej Babiš on Monday following an October election won by the billionaire leader's populist ANO party. Workers at the Louvre Museum voted to strike over working conditions and other complaints, dealing another blow to the Paris Museum after an embarrassing jewelry heist in October. Australian media name a father and son as the gunmen who killed 16 people in a targeted attack at the Jewish Hanukkah event at Sydney's Bondi Beach. Police say the older man died at the scene. Son is critically injured, and the Prime Minister signalled tougher gun laws after the deadliest attack in decades. Thailand says it has halted fuel shipments through a Laos border checkpoint amid fears that supplies are being diverted to Cambodia. The move comes as fighting with Cambodia spreads along the disputed border with no signs of de-escalation despite ceasefire efforts. Syria says it arrested 5 suspects linked to a shooting in Palmyra that killed 2 US soldiers and a civilian interpreter. Authorities say the attacker, who was shot dead, is a member of the security forces suspected of sympathizing with Islamic State. China says it supports Hong Kong's crime and national security measures following the conviction of media mogul Jimmy Lai. Despite international condemnation, Beijing says it firmly backs the city's authorities in punishing acts it says endanger national security. And let's start with the top focus viewers. The Kremlin has said that it has received no official information on possible Ukraine peace talks, despite efforts and reports of discussions in Geneva. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Moscow is closely following media reports, but has not been formally briefed through diplomatic channels. He added there are no plans this week for a meeting between Russian and US negotiators, though President Putin remains open to talks. Peskov also dismissed media reports of a possible European peace plan, saying such serious issues cannot be discussed through press speculation. The comments come after the US and Ukraine said they had drafted a refined peace framework following talks in Geneva without releasing details. Ukrainian President Zelensky has also signaled flexibility, offering to drop NATO ambitions during talks with US officials. Meanwhile, European markets edged higher, lifted by optimism over interest rate cuts and hopes of progress toward a Russia-Ukraine ceasefire. Let's listen in.
Der DAX ist positiv in diese Woche gestartet, wenngleich ich auch befürchte, dass die Luft ein bisschen raus ist aus dem Markt, denn wir haben die letzte Zinssenkung in den Vereinigten Staaten gesehen und aktuell fehlt mir ein bisschen die Fantasie, wie die Jahresendrallye noch begründet werden darf. Ich persönlich erwarte kein Kursfeuerwerk zum Ende des Jahres als das sogenannte Jahresendrallye, sondern wir werden vielleicht sogenanntes Windows-Dressing noch sehen, also leichte Verschiebungen hin zum Positiven. Unterm Strich glaube ich tatsächlich, dass wir jetzt in den nächsten 2 Wochen eher die Luft ein bisschen raus haben werden, wenngleich auch natürlich die Hoffnung auf einen Frieden in der Ukraine weiterhin besteht.
And now let's welcome retired Major General G.D. Dwivedi, who is a defense analyst from New Delhi, to join us in this conversation. Thank you, retired Major General, for joining us here at NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you once again. Retired Major General, how long do you think this momentum in the European markets is going to continue? Talks are underway between Ukraine and the West for the second day today in the summit in Berlin. Do you think the outcome is going to be positive enough for the markets in Europe to continue their momentum?
Well, the point is that it's very difficult to predict as to what the outcome going to be at the Berlin summit that is on, because the point is that there is a serious difference between the European and Zelensky on one side and the American peace proposal on the other side, because there are a couple of sticking points. And these points are that Zelensky or the European Union are not prepared to cede territory as per the peace proposal plan. And the second point is that the security of Ukraine, because in case the peace plan is accepted, there is no security guarantee as to why the Russian aggression will not take place again, or the Russians would they actually back off from their territorial claims as far as Ukraine is concerned, or rather making it their own sphere of influence. Now, these are two major sticking points. Yes, as far as President Zelensky is concerned, he is willing to back down from joining the NATO as long as the security guarantee is given. And between the NATO members and the Americans, the security guarantee is Article 5. That is that in case there is an attack on any one of the nations, then it is considered as attack on the all NATO members. Now that kind of guarantee is what the President Zelensky is seeking, or whether that will come about, it's a big question mark. And secondly, will there consensus be between American peace proposal and the European and Zelensky agreeing that yes, the peace proposal accepted, provided there is no secession of territory or ceding of territory by the Ukrainian, because after what are they fought for? They lost more than 100,000 soldiers basically to protect the territory, and Donbass still is not under fully Russian control, about 20% still, or not 20, about 12% is still with the Ukrainians. So my point is that these talks are actually very complex, because there is no meeting point between the two sides, and where will the compromise be arrived? That will actually decide the outcome of the talks. And as long as the talks do not fructify, the markets will still remain turbulent, because markets only stabilize when there is a degree of predictability on the peace or on the cessation of hostilities. So therefore, it's difficult to predict, but I find that it's a very complex issue, and I don't think the consensus would be arrived during these talks. Kriti.
Major General, now the NATO membership was out of the question much earlier. I believe in 2019 itself, it was clear enough that it's very unlikely for Ukraine to join NATO. So that is out of the question. Next is the issue of territorial concessions. Russia is unlikely to budge on that question. As far as the security guarantees are concerned, even if the European Union offers any, US is unlikely to do that, because Trump has been very frustrated with Zelensky so far. So what's really left for Zelensky to bargain? Is it not now rather clear that the war seems to be slipping away from him?
The point is this, that the Trump's peace proposal was modified, and a new proposal was actually formulated by the European Union and President Zelensky together. The issue is that President Trump's proposal has not been accepted because of the sticking points, and I don't think President Zelensky would agree to cede territory, because how can he face his own domestic audience, because after all they have fought for nearly 4 years, and territory was one of the major reasons for the Russians to attack Ukraine. And as per that time, President Trump's President Putin's calculation that Ukraine will be overrun in matter of weeks, which has not fructified. So I don't think that ceding territory would be acceptable to President Zelensky or Ukrainian or European Union, because this will set a precedence. That means that you can attack a country and you can take the territory by force. Well, this basically violates the tenet of sovereignty, and here sovereignty is on stake as far as Ukraine is concerned. And secondly is the security guarantee, because until there is a security guarantee, how can Ukraine or President Zelensky accept the ceasefire or cessation of hostilities? So therefore, there is a very clear-cut, I think, red lines. As far as Ukraine is concerned or the Europe is concerned, ceding a territory is a red line. And secondly, this means it violates the sovereignty of a country. And President Putin, in fact, his whole effort or his whole aim was to grab territory, at least Donbass, if not the full Ukraine, and which has not happened. So he is also not likely to back off. So therefore, there is no meeting common ground between the two countries. Well, NATO membership, yes, you are right that in 2019 itself, in principle, I think Ukraine or President Zelensky had accepted that they will not be joining NATO, but there was no timeline. What it was that they will not be joining NATO anytime soon, but it was not a given option for all times. So therefore, Kriti, I think the situation is very complex. There's no meeting ground between the two, and I don't think Berlin talks are going to end up in any concrete decision on this issue. Kriti.
All right, we'll wait out for that, retired Major General. But thank you for joining us in this discussion. But do stay on as we move on to another crucial news coming in. Viewers, a Hong Kong media tycoon and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai is found guilty of national security and sedition offences, facing life in prison. The verdict delivered in the West Kowloon District Court comes after a 2-year trial under Hong Kong's 2020 national security law and colonial-era sedition laws. Lai, who's 78, remains in custody, while his family and supporters decry the conviction as politically motivated and an attack on press freedom. Rights groups including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch call it a travesty of justice, urging his immediate release. Authorities say Lai used his newspaper, Apple Daily, and foreign contacts to lobby against Chinese and Hong Kong authorities. Judges label him a mastermind of conspiracies to destabilize the government. 3 Apple Daily entities co-accused with Lai are also found guilty. The case draws international criticism. The UK calls for Lai's release, citing political motivations, and Taiwan condemns the ruling as a threat to Hong Kong's autonomy. The next court date is January 10, when Lai can appeal. Let's listen in.
National Security Department welcomed the judgment delivered by the court today, convicting Lai Chi-ying on 2 charges relating to the conspiracy to collude with a foreign country, and 1 charge relating to the conspiracy to publish the seditious publications. The court particularly highlighted that the testimony of the Lai is a contradiction, inconsistent, and reliable, and also highlighted that he is the mastermind of the 3 charges.
And I now request retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi to join us back into the discussion here. Thank you for staying with us, retired Major General. Now, is it safe to say that the promise of democracy made to Hong Kong was clearly just a farce?
Well, Kriti, we need to go into a little bit of background. Firstly, Jimmy Lai was a media tycoon, and he was fierce critic of the Chinese state and the way the Chinese were imposing themselves on Hong Kong, because if we go back point in time, the Hong Kong was on 99-year lease to China, and it reverted back on 1st July 1997 back to China. In fact, I was that time in China, posted as defense attaché, witnessed this reversion back to the mainland. The point was, there was the understanding that Hong Kong will be treated under the system, one state, and that will be 2 laws, 1 country, 2 systems. Now that has not exactly happened, and over a period of time, the Republic of China Communist government has imposed a number of restrictions on Hong Kong, and today is entity or this the very promise that was given to them under 1 country, 2 system almost doesn't exist. And that's why under that national security law, which was imposed in 2020, because in 2019 there were serious protests in Hong Kong, and Jimmy Lai was fully supporting the for democratic norms to be restored to Hong Kong. And after that, in 2020, this national security law was imposed, and under that law is very stringent. Any protest is taken as sedition. There really, even press cannot openly express itself, and judiciary today is willy-nilly responding to the dictates of the communist government in China. So therefore, this controversial national security law actually is the reason why Jimmy Lai was tried and taken into custody in 2020. He was in prison for last almost 5 years, and now this trial had taken place, which was quite known that he will be convicted because under national security law, any action of protest or dissent is taken as act of sedition, and therefore he has been convicted and he could quite face lifelong imprisonment. Now even UK has very strongly come out because it was their colony in 20 till 1997 that this law should be repealed. But I don't think communist government is going to let it go. In fact, the news is tightening on Hong Kong day by day, and communist government in China is ensuring that old one country two system actually expires much before its due date of I think 1949. Kriti.
All right, so if convicted, he faces a life term. What are the options that he then has for appeal? Could he go to the international court?
Kriti, under the national security law conviction, there is very little chance of any appeal either being upheld or even the proposition or the legality of an appeal, because appeal can be turned down. Anyone convicted under the national security law. So I don't see much of future for Mr. Jimmy Lai because he will not be able to get an appeal because there is no, it can be denied under the national security law. So therefore he will not be able to go to International Court of Justice Hague because the communist government or the People's Republic of China government will not allow him to appeal or uphold his appeal, and possibly he faces a lifelong sentence. It's a no-go situation because, as I said, the national security law is very stringent, and it can, what you can say is it can hold people under detention. It can levy serious charges of sedition or even they call it separatism, which is Chinese are very, very sensitive about. So I don't think that Jimmy Lai has much a chance for appeal because most likely this appeal will be denied and he will have to face lifelong imprisonment. I think on this score, I don't see much a chance for justice being meted. And world can raise hue and cry, but Chinese government never listens to the global opinion. They stick by their own convictions, and they never bothered about the human rights or any such bogey that is raised by the global community. Kriti.
All right. Thank you, Retired Major General, for joining us and explaining the nuances of the situation to us. With that, I'd let you go. And the viewers, moving on, there are updates coming in now from Sydney. As per a new emerging update, one of the victims of the Bondi Beach mass shooting was a French national, now identified as Dan El-Qaim. The French Foreign Minister has confirmed his details of passing away and called the incident an unprecedented anti-Semitic terrorist attack. Let's listen in.
Ce week-end, l'Australie a été endeuillée par un attentat terroriste antisémite sans précédent, la pire tuerie que le pays ait eu à connaître depuis 3 décennies au moins. Et c'est dans ce contexte que nous avons appris avec une profonde tristesse la disparition de notre compatriote Dan El-Qaim, qui compte parmi les 16 personnes décédées à cette occasion.
The French Foreign Minister has also shared about another victim, a Franco-Dutch man who was injured during the shooting. According to reports, he has received medical treatment and would be able to recover fully with the support of French embassy systems present in the area. Meanwhile, the Slovak president has said that a Slovak woman was also killed during the shooting incident. A duo of 50-year-old father and his 24-year-old son carried out the mass shootings at Sydney's famed Bondi Beach yesterday, killing 15 people and injuring 40 others. Police officials reported that the father was killed at the scene, which took the overall death toll to 16, while the son was critically wounded and admitted to the hospital. And some more news from France now. The Louvre Museum in Paris will remain closed on December 15 after staff voted to strike over pay and working conditions. The walkout is expected to disrupt access for thousands of visitors to the world's most visited museum, which typically welcomes around 30,000 people a day. The strike is backed by about 400 employees and was called by 3 major unions. They say working conditions have steadily deteriorated, citing staff shortages, heavier workloads, and conflicting instructions that make it difficult to do their jobs. Union demands include hiring more staff, especially in security and visitor services, and improving overall working conditions. They're also opposing a planned 45% ticket price hike for non-European Union tourists set to take effect in mid-January. The strike adds to recent troubles at the Louvre following a major jewel heist and infrastructure issues, including a water leak that damaged ancient books. Listen in to one of the unionists.
Nous, on sait qu'il y a 400 personnes qui ont voté, donc je redis, à l'unanimité la grève aujourd'hui. Après, on est habitué à ce que la direction fasse le choix d'ouvrir ou non pour partie. Nous, on estime, vu le nombre de grévistes qui se sont déclarés ce matin, si le Louvre faisait le choix d'ouvrir, ça voudrait dire que les conditions de sûreté et de sécurité pour le public, le palais et les collections ne sont pas réunies. Donc ça sera sa responsabilité. Nous cessons le travail aujourd'hui. Nous espérons pouvoir le reprendre le plus rapidement possible. Ça veut dire des engagements fermes et des engagements qui devront venir du ministère de la Culture, puisque jusqu'à présent, la direction du Louvre n'a jamais répondu à ces demandes.
And now joining me in this discussion is Alexander Shaw, who is a French and British journalist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Alexander, for joining us here at NewsX World. Do take us through what are the concerns that the union is raising over the Louvre Museum. It remains closed for another day today. Some of the reasons, of course, we have already cited in our report, but for someone who's there in London, I'm sure you've tracked the situation more closely.
Yes, absolutely. So the Louvre is closed today because a large number of staff are on strike. This includes front house workers and security staff whose presence is essential for the museum to operate safely. As a result, management decided the museum could not open to the public. Staff say they are struggling with deteriorating working conditions caused by chronic understaffing and overwhelming visitor numbers. The Louvre is the most visited museum in the world, welcoming close to 9 million people a year. And employees argue that resources and staffing levels have not kept up with this reality. The core concerns are safety, workload, and sustainability. And workers say overcrowding has become routine, shifts are exhausting, and there are growing worries about how well both visitors and artworks can be protected under current conditions.
All right. Do you think the union and the unionists they're going to get what they're expecting from the authorities in any in any time soon?
I'm not sure, but recent incidents have intensified the staff's concerns. There has been, as you mentioned, a high-profile robbery incident at the museum in October, which unions have cited as evidence of security weaknesses. And in addition, the Louvre has repeatedly faced flood risks, as you said, linked to the River Seine that's nearby, reminding staff how vulnerable the site can be during extreme conditions. So pay is part of the wider wider discussion, but unions stress that this strike is primarily about working conditions and safety. The argument is that without enough trained staff on the ground, no salary increase alone can solve the deeper problems.
Alexander, is the labor strike also affecting the footfall in the museum?
No. The Louvre is closed today. The museum is closed today. So really, tourists are understandably frustrated because they wanted to go visit the museum, especially those who traveled long distances specifically to visit the Louvre. However, in France, there's also a degree of public understanding, as many people recognize the pressures facing workers in major public institutions. And for international visitors and other international tourists coming to Paris or visiting Paris, the closure is disappointing and disruptive. Tickets are usually refunded or rescheduled, but the situation underlines how vulnerable global tourism plans can be to local labor disputes.
All right, thank you, Alexander, for speaking to us. Unfortunately, running short on time. But with that, viewers, let's move on to some more news that's coming in. Now, researchers in Sweden have unveiled a breakthrough way to create high-performance electronic electrodes using only visible light. The new method eliminates the need for toxic chemicals, harmful UV light, or expensive equipment. Scientists at Linköping and Lund University say specially designed water-soluble monomers can be activated with simple LED lights, allowing conductive plastics to form directly on surfaces. Now, these include glass, textiles, and even living skin. The technique enables electrodes to be patterned precisely using light, with unused materials simply washed away. Researchers say the resulting conductive plastics can carry both electrical and ionic signals, making them especially suited for medical use. Tests on anesthetics mice showed that clearer recordings of low-frequency brain activity compared with traditional metal EEG electrodes. The team says the technology could lead to wearable sensors, skin-mounted electronics, and safer large-scale production of organic electronic circuits. That's all we have time for in this bulletin of NewsX World, but do stay tuned for all